Okay, welcome everyone. We're glad you've joined us today to celebrate and learn from some of the creative ways that Ontario's literacy and basic skills programs evolved in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. To say that there have been a lot of changes over the past year would be an understatement. And we're grateful to all of the programs that agreed to share what they've learned in the process. I'm Summer Burton, and I'll be your host today. Before we begin, I want to let you know that we are recording this session so we can share it with those who aren't able to attend. It will be posted on the Quill website, and we'll share the link with you in just a minute. We're being supported today by ASL interpreters Carrie and Jamie, so if you need the ability to pin both of their screens for viewing, please let us know in the chat. We'd like to recognize our friends at Deaf Literacy Initiative for making the interpretation of today's webinar possible. We would also like to take a moment to acknowledge Employment Ontario and the Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development. The research we're sharing with you today was made possible through the funding by the ministry, and we appreciate their ongoing support. With that said, the views expressed in today's presentation are those of the researchers and of the programs we spoke to, and do not necessarily reflect those of the province. The Government of Ontario and its agencies are in no way bound by the recommendations that we're sharing today. And speaking of recommendations, we'll take a look at our agenda. We'll start by telling you a bit about the project that inspired today's presentation, and then we'll share some tips, tricks, and a whole lot of information learned through experience on subjects that include marketing your program during a pandemic, keeping the lines of communication open when your office is closed, and modifying the intake process so you can still get what you need from clients. We'll also talk about different ways of supporting learners during these strange times, including what programs have done to identify learner needs, help their learners access technology and internet service, and support their learning both in person and online. We'll share some of the helpful platforms and programs they've used and talk about how they've assessed learner progress too. We'll also get into some of the learning over the last year in terms of supporting staff and volunteers, as well as program administration. And finally, with an eye on the future, we'll look at getting ready to return to in-person delivery and what we can do now to prepare for possible learning disruptions in the future. We welcome you to use the chat to ask questions. In fact, one question that I know people will have is if they can get a copy of the slides from today, and yes, absolutely you can. We'll go ahead and put those in the chat shortly. And actually, it's my friend Deb Flynn who will be posting those because she is being kind enough to support me on today's webinar. So I want to send thanks to her. She'll be keeping her eye on the chat, and I'll check in a couple of times during the session to see if anything urgent has popped up. We'll also review and discuss any of your comments or questions at the end of the session as well. We hope you'll take that opportunity to share any of your own best practices with others on the call. Jennifer Hewitt was the researcher for this project, which was focused on surveying and interviewing the staff at adult literacy programs and networks across Ontario. Executive directors, program managers, support staff, program coordinators, literacy practitioners, and volunteer tutors from community-based, school board-based, and college-based literacy programs all provided input through the completion of 39 surveys and 23 interviews. That is a lot of information from a lot of different perspectives. These programs shared adaptations they'd made to every area of their operations, including administration, marketing, intake processes, delivery, learning resources and technology, assessments, and staff support. It's a lot. Now, everyone's journey has been different this year, depending on how they delivered services prior to the pandemic, whether they were located on their own or inside another building or organization. Their own access to and understanding of technology, the level of learners they served, and more. While there are differences, there are also key similarities, excellent practices and resources that were mentioned again and again during Jennifer's research, and we're happy to share them with you today. Now, we won't cover absolutely every suggestion and tip shared by literacy programs in today's webinar. If we did, I think we'd be spending the rest of the day together. That said, the full research report, Best Practices in Adult Literacy Program Delivery During the COVID-19 Pandemic, is available on the Quill website. The link will appear on your screen now, and we will also put it in the chat as well. When you visit the website, you'll also notice several tip sheets that have been created to share key best practices in themes that include marketing, engaging volunteers, helping learners access technology, and more. I'll reference them several times throughout today's presentation, and we'll provide you with some direct links to them as well. Jennifer shared with us just how impressed she was by the lengths that literacy program management, practitioners, staff, and volunteers have gone to in an effort to keep serving learners during these challenging times. If she could give each of you a medal, she would, but in her place, we'll say a great big thank you for not only your ongoing commitment to learner success, but also agreeing to share your time and expertise to help others in the literacy field navigate these challenging times. So we're going to start today with what is often the beginning of a journey for a learner, and that's finding out that adult literacy programs even exist and that they can help them achieve their goals. With so many programs and services closed, some of the traditional sources for learner referrals dried up completely. And with marketing budgets somewhere between limited and non-existent, most programs needed to get creative to get the word out. Agencies that were able to shift their marketing suggested several ways that others could follow their lead. Making sure that your referral partners know you're still able to offer service is a good place to start. So programs suggested attending virtual community meetings to spread the word. Some programs also began reaching out to organizations they wouldn't normally have a referral relationship with to see how they could work together. Every email sent to both those current and new contacts can be used as a marketing opportunity by expanding your email signature. Some programs embedded posters for upcoming classes, or a "click here to learn more" graphic within every email, getting the word out without much extra effort. With fewer learners being referred, some programs faced having to cancel group sessions that needed a minimum number of attendees to run. They found success, however, by offering short-term, targeted training programs focused on a specific skill, like digital literacy, and marketing it to an audience that would benefit from that specific skill. Programs looked hard at what their strengths were and played to them. If they had a deep understanding of the local labor market, they promoted short-term, employment-focused training that was marketed to people displaced from their jobs due to COVID-19. Those who reached out to other agencies to discuss offering a shared program Bringing learners or clients from both agencies together to form a single cohort also reported greater success. Looking for a new audience for literacy upgrading was also a win. People suddenly found themselves with time on their hands. And those in precarious work situations in particular were looking for stability in these unprecedented times. Programs went online across several platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to seek out people who were already comfortable navigating an online world and who may now have the time and motivation to upgrade their skills from home. Some of these folks may never have considered in-person programming, even if it weren't a pandemic, either because of their schedules or a lack of comfort with face-to-face contact. So a new audience of possible learners opened up. That said, navigating and creating material for social media isn't everyone's strength. So to help spread the word online, programs that use it suggested not just creating marketing content on your social platforms, but then sharing it with other programs via email so that they can just copy paste or upload it easy to their own websites and online profiles. And speaking of websites, programs reminded us that making sure your website is up to date with information about how the pandemic is affecting your service is critically important. As we've seen over the last year, things can change from yellow to red to green to gray and back again quickly. So frequent, here's how we're doing things now, website updates are very important. That said, not everyone is going to visit your website. After all, a lot of people aren't comfortable navigating online and may never find you. So keeping in mind that one of the most successful marketing strategies has always been go to where your audience is, some programs reported success by literally taking their marketing offline and to the streets. Posters and signs in windows, banners hung facing bus stops, even flags with contact information flying from the building. One program pointed out the value of marketing at the local grocery store, given that it's the one place that almost everyone in a community will visit, even during the pandemic. They drew attention by renting window space at the grocery store and advertising help with digital literacy, including how to place an online order for your groceries. Very, very smart. Now, we know that marketing and fundraising are often tied together, so we'll mention here that the challenges associated with reaching your audience impacted donations too. Most fundraising done by literacy programs is based on in-person events, walks, spelling bees, Scrabble tournaments, or dinners, none of which are possible during a lockdown. One agency suggested hosting an online cooking class as an alternative, charging a fee for attendees and arranging a chef to host who's willing to provide their expertise at a discount or for free. More ideas are certainly needed in this area, so we welcome you to start popping your fundraising suggestions in the chat now. I'll come back and check on them in a bit. Before we move on, this is your heads up that there is a tip sheet available that's focused entirely on marketing. So make sure that if getting the word out about your program is a focus, you look for some additional suggestions in that tip sheet. We'll go ahead and share a link to that marketing tip sheet in the chat as well. So once word gets out that your services are available, albeit possibly in a different format than before, people may want to get in touch. This presented a big challenge at the start of the pandemic, especially with programs closing for what we originally thought was a couple of weeks, that for some have turned into more than a year. Because so few of us had a plan in place for remote telephone communication, many programs had to figure it out through trial and error. This is what they learned. programs experimented with setting up call forwarding and remote phone systems to redirect office calls and voicemails to staff at home. Voice over Internet Protocol, or VoIP, services were noted as an effective tool for this kind of setup, especially because most offer extension numbers that can be assigned to staff working both remotely and in office. Other programs set up an alert system connected to their phone line so that any voicemail message left would trigger an email, letting staff know to dial in and pick up the message. Some systems, like our organization actually, can even email the recorded voicemail message directly to staff so they can listen to them as audio files on the computer at home. To find out which of these options is available to you, be sure to contact your telephone provider directly. Of course, when someone leaves a message, the next step is usually to call them back, and this is where many programs hit a snag. Staff may be uncomfortable calling learners from their personal phone, so systems can be put in place to mask that personal number. Some remote phone systems allow people to use an app on their cell phone to make a call. What displays to anyone receiving that call is the organization's name and office phone number. Without a remote phone system, staff can also dial *67 before making a call. Doing so means the call shows up as private or blocked on the recipient's caller ID. The only caution we have is that some people will not pick up calls that show up this way. They don't know who's on the other end of the line. Letting learners know by email or text exactly when you'll call can encourage them to answer. And speaking of texting, because texting has become the first choice for communication by a lot of learners, programs found that setting up a way to text learners was a big win. If purchasing an inexpensive phone with a text plan isn't within reach, apps like Text Now, Text Me, and Text Free, since a pattern, send texts from a fake burner number, and they've become a very popular choice. When making a choice between apps, we would recommend that you read user reviews to find out which might be best for your needs. Establishing a system to get physical mail deliveries was also important to consider. If the office mailbox wasn't accessible, programs suggested contacting Canada Post and having mail forwarded to a staff person's home address. Before we move on to the next topic, Deb, were there any fundraising ideas posted in the chat that we can share?
Summer, I don't see any yet. None have popped up, but I'm sure that as we go along, some people may be willing to share some of those.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on chat, so no worries there. Now, near the start of the pandemic, intakes, as we know, ground to a halt. Well, everything ground to a halt, really. Then, slowly, programs began the process of enrolling new learners. The challenges they faced were significant, including how to safely collect personal information, complete learner consent forms, get signatures, and learn about their clients' needs, particularly when remote intake means that the learner may not be able to speak privately and therefore authentically. That lack of face-to-face contact makes it more difficult both to pick up on body language and nonverbal cues and to accurately assess literacy levels. Over time, many found good ways to safely and effectively gather and store this information. So let's take a look at what they've been doing. Well, some programs met learners in parking lots or other public places and exchanged documents and signatures at a safe distance. Many programs started the move online by creating Google Forms that could be used to collect their learners' basic information, which they then exported to the learner file. Others gathered this information verbally over the phone and entered it directly into CAMS. Programs worked around the challenge of filling out consent forms in a number of different ways, including sending the consent form to the client in the body of an email and asking them to respond to that email with a yes if they agree. Creating a fillable consent form with a button that says, "Click here if you agree," which they would send to and review verbally with the learner before the client clicked the button. And displaying the consent form on a shared screen like we're doing today during a virtual meeting with the learner. Then asking them to verbally agree or type yes in the chat. Now, for both of those to work, the video or the chat needs to be downloaded for later reference. Needs assessments were handled in a similar way, with some practitioners doing in-depth telephone or video intake sessions, asking both traditional comprehension questions and new questions about how the learner was demonstrating their skills during the pandemic. Assessment forms were also sent by email or snail mail with a request for the learner to fill them out and send them back. Learners were also invited to email a photo or a scan of the completed assessment, or even complete the assessment with their camera turned on in a virtual intake meeting, so the practitioner could answer questions and observe their work. In some cases, the types of assessments that programs used were not allowed to be sent electronically. Camera, for example. New assessments were brought into play, like the skills marker tool. Some of you may know that as the Essential Skills for Employment and on Education. It's the EC tool. Now, getting learner signatures, obviously a big challenge as well, which programs creatively worked around by mailing forms along with a self-addressed stamped envelope for learners to sign and return. Getting the client's verbal consent to sign on their behalf until such time as the signature could be collected in person. Having learners sign paper copies of forms and submit them electronically as photographs or scans, or even holding them up to the camera during a video call so they could take a screenshot. And also by using e-signature fields embedded in PDF fillable forms. To make it easier for learners, some programs created a one-stop shop for any forms that needed to be filled out. A Google Drive or site was a great suggestion made by some of the programs we spoke to. That way, learners could navigate to a single location to download and fill out all the intake forms that the program needed. Once these forms and signatures were gathered, the issue of how to store them securely becomes critical. For some programs, the solution lay in an encrypted server that staff could access remotely for storing and getting information into and out of learner plans and other confidential information. While that may seem like something out of reach for smaller programs, our researcher Jennifer shared that these servers can be bundled with phone and internet service and could include technical support either in person or remotely. When current operating costs are considered, they can be more affordable than you may realize. She welcomes anyone on today's call to contact her for more information, and you'll see her email address appear on the screen shortly. And of course, we'll also pop that into chat for you. The programs that we spoke to pointed out that they didn't just need to shift from in-person to online or distance learning. They often had to change what they were offering altogether to meet changing learner needs. More learners needed digital literacy training and an understanding of how to find reliable and accurate information about health protocols. They also needed support to help their children be successful in their own remote learning and creative ways to find time to focus on their learning, despite being quarantined at home with others needing their attention and support. Many needed reassurance and wellness checks or tips for coping with change, isolation, and anxiety. And these needs sometimes had to take precedence over learning, or at least had to come first in the conversation. As a result of stress, many learners felt unable to commit to anything but short, very targeted training sessions. There was also a shift in demographics as many learners in rural areas or with lower literacy levels dropped away from programs as they couldn't or wouldn't access online services. And finally, learners working with adult literacy programs often had a very different relationship with work than they had in the past, with many laid off and collecting CERB. For some, this was a great motivator to focus on skills upgrading, while others no longer felt committed to building employment skills because they believed work was out of reach anyway. Before we look at how programs handled those changing learner needs and how they helped them succeed, I will pose this question. What did you notice changed with your learner demographics? Please share your observations in the chat, and I'll check on them in a minute. You're welcome to pop your fundraising thoughts in there at the same time.
Summer,
Mm-hmm.
Deborah here.
Hi
There
there.
are some questions about how you would use online ready assessments or how it works or what it looks like. So if some of the participants today would like to share that information in chat, it would be wonderful.
I think what we will do is at the end of the session, we booked a really nice full 2-hour period for this particular presentation. It won't probably take us 2 hours to get through. But yesterday at the end of our session, we opened the floor, turned off the screen sharing, and just had people chat about their experiences, ask for recommendations for different types of tools that they've used for specific tasks. So we'll do that again at the end of today's session. I think that's a great idea. Okay, so many programs started by conducting a digital audit of what resources the learner had access to, both technology and skill-wise. Tracking that information along with each learner's preferred method of communication, the best time to contact them, and the platforms they're comfortable using helped create a framework on which to build their remote learning plan. Let's take a look at why each of those individual elements was so important to the programs that tracked them. First, staying in touch with learners using their preferred communication method, be it by phone, text, email, snail mail, Facebook Messenger, or WhatsApp, helped learners to feel connected, supported, and not like they were being asked to figure out a new way of doing things at a time when stress and personal demands are high. And just so you know, there's a tip sheet chock full of other great suggestions and tips available that's focused specifically on communicating effectively with learners. So please take a look at that for some more information. And Deb will pop a link to that tip sheet in the chat now. Now that leads me to another really critical and complex element of working with learners remotely. There is a very good chance that no two learners have the exact same skills, technology, needs, and time. COVID-19 took us from a situation where you could bring a group of learners who, yes, all had different skills and needs into a room at the same time and at least know that they would all be using the same technology. Many programs have Chromebooks or tablets and are comfortable helping their learners navigate using that technology. But when each learner may be using a completely different way of connecting to the internet on devices with different operating systems and capabilities, and some are not using technology at all, it can be very difficult to support. At least tracking what each person is using and being able to group like technology together means you can consider what will work across multiple platforms, including without the use of technology. And that's made the work a lot more manageable for program staff. Having to support learners with such diverse access to resources has provided an unanticipated side benefit. Over the past year, many programs have tried a bunch of different platforms and methods to support learners, which has resulted in a toolbox of formats that clients can now choose from. Depending on their needs, learners may be able to access support through paper-based assignments, having information sent by text, worked on collaboratively in an online video call, discussed over the phone, completed online, or downloaded at their convenience from a shared website. Programs shared that when learners were given a choice of the most familiar and comfortable way of accessing material, they were far more likely to stay engaged in programming during COVID. Being able to access support in the way that suits them best is particularly helpful for learners trying online learning for the first time, who may need something familiar, in addition to lots of support and encouragement from literacy program staff to make that transition. You know, it's interesting. Practitioners who themselves struggled to start using a whole host of new technology are amazing resources and role models here, especially for learners that are new to the online environment. Technology is complicated, and recognizing and talking about the feeling of intimidation that it can inspire can really help learners feel like they aren't alone. It's a great opportunity for literacy program staff and learners to navigate that digital journey together. Before we move on, let's quickly check in on the chat. Deb, is there anything people shared about their changing learner demographics or other topics that you'd like to mention?
Tish mentioned that her LBS program surveyed all of their learners on their needs, whether it was computer technology or lessons from their learner plans. So that's what, and that was something that she did. Others provided headphones that helped with concentration. There was concerns about learners who didn't have the privacy or space to continue working online or one-to-one because everyone was home.
Mm-hmm.
And someone also mentioned that we have more students from farther away. So, or those whom our prior attendance requirements were prohibitive. So, you know, they've seen a real mishmash of, you know, wanting to know how does the online assessments work, and then the difference in the demographics that they're seeing in their programs today. I have a new message. I'll just take a look. Oh, Joyce Bigelow said that they purchased USB and routers that work on cell data through TELUS and Rogers to lend out to learners.
Awesome. That's a great tip as well. So to kind of sum up what I just heard there, we're seeing big changes and challenges, but we're also seeing some interesting benefits in the fact that we're able to engage some learners that we were not necessarily able to engage before. Very, very interesting.
Yes, and some of the programs have loaned laptops to learners, and I can tell you that we have a sample from Action Read and Guelph of a loaner permission form in the final report, in the appendices of the final report. So
Wonderful.
there's some forms in there that could be useful that you don't have to create your own.
Perfect. And can I just say thanks for the segue, because it's a perfect opportunity for us to go right into helping learners access technology. It was an excellent timing for that particular comment. So when our programs discovered that some of the learners that they had, of course, had either no devices at all, or older devices, or no internet, literacy programs certainly worked creatively to help them. Sometimes that was through referrals to agencies that could help them access technology. And Renewed Computer Technology, or RCT, is one of the programs that might do that. And local social service agencies like Ontario Works can sometimes assist with that. They also made referrals to organizations that could supply low-cost internet, like the Government of Canada's Connecting Families program. Now, staying on top of funding sources is a lot of work and a big responsibility, but programs also shared what a benefit it can be for learners, and many of whom didn't have the resources or ability to find information about computer or internet promotions all on their own. Some programs were even able to apply for funding themselves through local foundations or other charities, which they used to provide learners with technology. Others redirected unused travel funds to provide internet sticks or pay bills. In a pinch, many programs figured out the few public Wi-Fi locations that were still up and running and directed learners to them, or even welcomed learners to their own parking lots to use their office Wi-Fi signal. Many programs, and this is something that you just alluded to, Deb, created processes to loan their own devices out to learners. They developed some excellent policies and procedures to make that happen, including ahead of time, downloading programs onto loaned computer, tablets, devices, so that learners didn't have to do it themselves. Including documents and other learning material on the device that didn't require internet access to use, or providing them on USB sticks if the learner was using a Chromebook or a laptop. They also installed desktop icons with easy to understand labels so learners knew how to find material quickly, and created short videos that demonstrated how to open a program, connect to Wi-Fi, and perform basic digital tasks. They then preloaded those video files onto the tablet or computer so that the learner could watch them and then follow along in the steps. Another suggestion that programs made was having one contact person, a volunteer or a staff person, that learners could reach out to with their computer questions and issues. So we've also put together a tip sheet about that. Be sure to check that out for more advice on how you can help learners get access to digital technology and internet service. As with the other tip sheets, we'll pop a short link to that specific resource in the chat in a moment. With at least some basic technology and internet in place, the transition to online learning began slowly for both program staff and for learners. As it developed, assignments and activities were exchanged using similar processes to the intake and assessment forms we talked about, often with the help of platforms like Google, whose Forms, Docs, and Drive features became the new classroom for many. Programs investigated apps to help learners submit documents and found an app called Genius Scan to be particularly helpful. It allows the learner to take a photo of handwritten work, convert that photo to a PDF, and email it to the practitioner for feedback. The Genius Sign app even allows learners to create an electronic signature and sign their work before turning it in, which opens the door to signing other documents as well. As time passed and literacy programs got more comfortable delivering their service in an online world, they experimented with things like Zoom Whiteboard, Google Jamboards, and Teams Viewer to find comfortable and simple to use learning environments that allowed a good level of interactivity. As with any time you try new technology, there's some trial and error, but some of the common tips that programs shared for successful delivery using those platforms included watching internet service. When it's poor and you have bad connectivity, turn off cameras and mics to help boost that internet connectivity and sound quality. If connectivity isn't an issue, using virtual backgrounds to protect privacy when working and learning from home was preferred. Using a variety of features and formats to keep learners engaged in the online environment was definitely mentioned, including opportunities for interaction through polls, surveys, the whiteboard, games, and quizzes. Following a routine with each session to help learners know what's expected and what will happen next was also a benefit, as was creating how-to videos for learners, explaining how to navigate the online platform. And finally, doing what we're doing today on this webinar, which is having one staff person facilitate a lesson while another attends to support learners with their questions and technology needs. For a full list of the different platforms that programs have been using, including a great chart that compares the top 5 choices, and those are Zoom, Google Meet, Google Classroom, MS Teams, and Blackboard Collaborate. Download that full report that today's webinar is based on. We'll make sure that you get a direct link in the chat for that report as well. Programs shared some great tips with us about the online resources they used, suggesting first that other programs create a shared list of resources that all staff members can add to, sorting them by how they can be used. For example, a section for online math resources, another section for digital literacy resources, another for grammar and spelling, and so on. They also recommended digitizing your program's favorite paper-based resources so they can be used online. This can be a big project and a bit overwhelming if it's not something you've done before. So the programs we spoke with suggested picking a single course subject or type of resource to digitize, and then testing it out with a group of learners to see how they like it. Starting small and working with easy-to-use programs like Google Forms can make that job more manageable. And this is where the discussions that can happen at a literacy service planning table can be particularly useful as well. Talk to other programs to find out who has digitized what material and see if we can share material with one another. The need to work with learners online also provides an opportunity to blend learning with Ontario's e-channel programs and use other online resources. Several examples will appear on your screen here. And once again, for a full list of the online courses and resources that programs recommended, we invite you to view the report Best Practices in Adult Literacy Program Delivery During the COVID-19 Pandemic. Don't forget the many resources available from your regional literacy support networks and provincial sector and stream support organizations as well. Please contact your network through the Learning Network of Ontario and know that organizations like Alpha Plus, la Coalition Ontarienne de Formation des Adultes, or COFA, please forgive my accent, Deaf Literacy Initiative, the Ontario Native Literacy Coalition, Community Literacy of Ontario, the Ontario Association of Adult and Continuing Education School Board Administrators, and the College Sector Council all have material to help. Now, I know that I just said a lot of organizations and more resources for you to remember. Don't worry, we've prepared a tip sheet for that. There are dozens of different online and distance learning support opportunities in there when you want to review them. And we'll be sure to pop a quick link in the chat for that resource as well. Unfortunately, even with the efforts programs made to help learners close that digital divide, a large number of learners still remain without adequate technology or internet service. And literacy programs have been working hard to support their learning journeys as well. They created duplicates of workbooks and activity sheets and dropped them off in mailboxes or on front porches across the province. They sent material through Canada Post, met in public parking lots to hand material off at a safe distance, and set up drop boxes at their programs for learners to pick up and leave material, a lot like the little free libraries. They also scheduled one-to-one telephone sessions where learners and tutors could meet to work through assignments. And they set up telephone office hours, times when any learner could call in for help. Given the extreme isolation that many learners without internet service faced during quarantine periods, journaling became an especially helpful tool. And talking with literacy program staff and other learners about their experiences became a critical piece of the puzzle, not only for learning, but for a feeling of community and support. Programs built on that support by offering creative writing groups and book clubs that learners could attend both virtually and by phone. Activities that focused on connections to family were also successful, like a group homework club session to help learners develop the skills they need to support their children who are learning from home, or involving the kids directly by offering family literacy activities. Some programs suggested setting up a calling chain where one learner could reach out to another to check on them, and that person would in turn reach out to another, who would reach out to another. Not only did that increase the sense of connection between learners, but the focus on checking up on the well-being of another was found to be helpful for several isolated learners. Once literacy practitioners supported their learners either online, through a paper-based drop-off system, or over the phone, the need to assess progress became a real issue. Without clear direction on how to administer milestones while keeping their content confidential, challenges with administering complex culminating tasks, and without being able to use some other go-to assessments like camera in a distance format, programs had to work through assessing learner progress creatively. Here are some of the techniques that they used. Some programs sent assessments to learners by mail, having them mail back, drop off, or scan and send the completed assessments, using programs like the Genius Scan app I told you about earlier. Recognizing that not seeing the learner work through the assessment means you can't confirm they didn't get help or have someone else do parts of it, other programs administered assessments verbally over the phone. Milestone 14 apparently works well this way. They also had learners create a video that demonstrated their knowledge or completed assessments on a shared screen during a video call so the practitioner could monitor them. Several alternative assessments were used during this time as well. Tests or quizzes generated through thatquiz.org, spellzone.com, coolmathgames.com, and others. Programs also created or modified assessments using programs like Google Forms and suggested that once again, programs work together to share the assessments they've made so that everyone can benefit. I'd like for you to take a minute to think about any of the online or remote assessments you've used over the past year. If you've got a favorite go-to assessment, please post it in the chat and we'll share it with others shortly.
Summer, I'd like to just butt in and tell you that we've had a lot of discussion in the chat. Joyce was very kind to share with us information about how they use TELUS and Rogers and were able to get internet access and devices for their learners.
Wonderful.
And people have been chatting about finding a common place where we could host all of those resources. I suggested the Literacy Resources and Discussion Forum that CLO, LLO, and Contact North have available. But Tracy Mullins also suggested the LBS and COVID, the LBS site that Alpha Plus put up.
On Facebook.
On Facebook, yes. They have a site though, a Google site that they've put together. So that's also available. And I have to tell you, 30 years in the field, and I'm still complaining that we need a centralized site. So I'm with all of these practitioners who are talking about the work that they're doing and making sure that we can share it.
Excellent. I feel a project idea coming on.
Well, the task-based portal was one of those projects. So, and that was mentioned. I'll just go on to say that Peel Halton Dufferin Adult Learning Center has created many of the milestones in Google Forms. So has the literacy group in Kitchener, Cambridge, and Waterloo. They've done them. Anyways, there's an address. Joyce Bigelow shared Christine Lamara's email address at the Peel Halton Dufferin Network and how she has how she's helped them with the different documents, the Google Forms that they've put together. I just want to promote something that you're doing at Literacy Link South Central. we do still, Quill still does take care of the task-based activity portal for LBS, and Literacy Link South Central has a job creation participation project where many of those task-based activities will be moved and incorporated into fillable PDFs and Google Forms, and they'll be on the actual portal in the site wherever you would look for your task-based activities you used before. So we're hoping that that will be up before the fall. It's going to take a long time because there's like 600 of them. So piece by piece, they will gradually be put in there. Sally asked, has anyone converted milestones to MS forms? And would anyone like to work together to tackle this? So I know that many people have put them into Google Forms and fillable PDFs, but and there's a couple of people who are reaching out to Sally and saying that they'd like to participate in doing that, putting milestones into MS forms.
Awesome. I think that this, the research that was done that led us to this presentation today has laid such a beautiful foundation for so many opportunities to work collaboratively on these issues that we know are not just impacting a program, but all programs. They're not just impacting one learner, but all learners. So I am thrilled that there are opportunities happening for people to connect and work together through the chat. And as I said, we'll open up the whole floor at the end of the presentation, and hopefully we'll have a whole bunch of people getting together after today's presentation to do some amazing work.
It would be really, oh, sorry.
No problem. I hope that they keep us updated was all I was going to say.
Oh, and I was going to say that it would be so lovely if we could get everybody to tell us which milestones they've already done and be able to share them in a central place so that others can access them, because I know that many programs are putting milestones into fillable PDFs and Google Forms, and they're already done. But it's the sharing part of it that I'm just not aware of how that would work.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. So we've heard a bunch of fabulous ideas that we're going to move forward with, hopefully at the end. Was there any specific assessments, just while we're chatting, that had come up that we should mention at this point, since we're talking, other than the milestones being moved online? Any other assessments mentioned?
Oh, I'm going back, trying to see. No, most of the discussion was around the milestones.
I just want to make sure not to skip anything important as it comes about. Everything is important. What am I talking about?
Yes, yes.
All right.
Yes, many people have shared. I mean, I know in my network area that many people have put their assessments in an online format.
Perfect. Well, another workaround that some folks mentioned to us when we were doing the research was opening on a limited part-time basis and scheduling the learners to come into the program just long enough to complete the milestone or the culminating task, even if all their actual learning was done remotely. So that's an excellent tip for those who are in a position, and we're going to talk about reopening procedures in a moment.
Right.
But those who are in a position to do so can also take advantage of that sort of layout.
So I have a couple of questions that have come up in chat. Comment that the ministry should have taken this on and converted the milestones. After all, they copyrighted them. There's a question that I have concern about milestone sharing. Does it have legal blessing to convert or ministry permission? And Joyce Bigelow commented, we've received permission to use the ones from Peel Dufferin Halton's from our ETC. They're on Google Stream, so easily shared. So, and I think we got the email earlier from the Peel Halton Dufferin Network person, Christine Lamara at gmail.com. She might be getting 60 emails today. But please tell her why you're writing.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I will mention one last tip that programs shared with us, specifically around milestones before we move on, and that is the value of partnering with e-channel programs like the Learning Hub. It was very beneficial because programs were able to share the learner, but then have the e-channel partner be the one that administered the milestone. So that's a suggestion we heard from several programs actually. All right, now, much like the learners that we just talked about, adult literacy program staff also needed and continue to need extra support to navigate what we're calling the new normal. They may not have an optimal environment for working and teaching from home because of a lack of space or distractions, poor internet service, or even just a lack of experience with teaching online. Programs shared several excellent suggestions for supporting their program staff as they transitioned to or continue to work from home. So we'll share those with you as well. One great tip was really similar to what we heard about learners, which was to perform an audit of each staff member's work from home needs and challenges so that they could be addressed individually. Part of that review may need to include the cost of upgraded internet service, furniture, office supplies, ergonomic equipment. Given an employer's responsibility in terms of health and safety, programs urged others to do periodic ergonomic checks when supporting staff with their work from home setup. You know, a quickly thrown together workspace may have been okay for a day or two, but it can cause serious issues when working from home becomes a long-term situation, as it clearly has. Training and professional development are also factors to consider during the work from home period as well. There's a learning curve, not only to working remotely, but to teaching remotely. How to keep learners engaged, using new online programs, and maintaining good mental health through it all. According to the programs we spoke with, PD was more of a focus near the start of the pandemic than it has been recently, as staff have become more comfortable with the way of doing business now. But the need for training certainly continues. And I would say that the number of folks that have been joining us on these webinars has been an excellent example of that. It's been offered, types of training have been offered in a variety of formats, from having staff, board members, or volunteers share their individual expertise, to attending live or pre-recorded webinars from other agencies. Popular options that programs mentioned as being valuable included sessions from Contact North, from each of the regional literacy networks, and in particular, the Pop-Up PD for Literacy Educators series that was offered through the Learning Networks of Ontario, eChannel, and the Provincial Support Organizations for Literacy. Videos from LinkedIn and YouTube were also mentioned as being helpful to support staff as they grew their skills. Programs also took advantage of tech coaching sessions with Alpha Plus, which really helped them prepare to use technology to its fullest during the transition to online and distance delivery. For more information on the host of professional development opportunities you could maybe do with your staff, be sure to download our professional development tip sheet. Another form of support that has had benefits is hosting weekly meetings for staff to share experiences and also brainstorm challenges, both personal and professional. It's a way to not only solve common work from home problems, but also keep staff feeling connected and supported. And that feeling of connection is really important right now. Anyone working in a caring profession, like adult literacy program staff, need extra support to avoid burnout and compassion fatigue. Helping staff talk about and work through their own fears and challenges during the pandemic gives them the strength they need to continue helping others. Now, a piece of that to consider is helping staff strike a balance between offering support and resources for learners who are struggling with isolation, anxiety, and stress, and setting boundaries so they can maintain a professional and positive relationship with learners. Supporting learners online, especially when video chat is involved, is a bit like peeking in someone's window. It can provide access to someone's personal life and circumstances that may be uncomfortable or challenging. So working with staff to discuss boundaries has been a big win for several programs. To help, our friends at Action Read have provided a sample boundaries policy, which you can access through the full report that I've mentioned a couple of times on today's call. We also urge you to review the suggestions and resources that are in our mental health tip sheet. There are some other policies to consider as well, especially as many workplaces look at reopening on a part-time or even full-time basis. A particularly important one is how organizations handle sick days. Especially with new variants of the coronavirus showing up in Canada, if a sick day policy isn't in place that provides compensation and direction for staff to feel they can stay home if they're unwell, they may come to work anyway. And we know that's how coronavirus spreads. It's no surprise that policies and procedures come up again when talking about the successful administration of literacy programs. In addition to a thoughtful review of sick leave policies, program administrators also shared these tips. Consider policies related to the use of personal computers for work purposes and the inherent risk that that can pose. If staff can't bring work computers home, are their home computers secure? Do they have up-to-date security software or firewalls installed? Can confidential learner information be safely accessed or stored on their home computer? This is where the encrypted server we talked about earlier comes in awfully handy. There's a huge element of risk that can be eliminated by storing confidential information off-site. Ideally, staff could bring home the technology and supplies they need to work remotely, but that does take some consideration. Program administrators suggested putting a process in place for removing equipment from the office and returning it later, and also urged others to consider the insurance implications. Check your insurance policy to see if there is any coverage for your equipment if it's taken off site. And make a plan for what to do if computers do get damaged. Don't wait until it happens to decide who's responsible for that damage and any resulting expenses. If funds are available, hiring someone to support the transition to remote work has proved very effective for some programs. For example, someone well-versed in computers can help figure out what's needed to work from home effectively, support staff with their technical issues, and provide training on how to use technology like distance learning software. Another suggestion was bringing in someone to work on digitizing training material that's only available in hard copy right now, either by scanning material or recreating it in a digital format, like Google Docs or a fillable PDF. Much like what we were just discussing around milestones. It was suggested that with many people laid off as the result of the pandemic, hiring someone with technical skills on a part-time contract basis may be more within reach than it used to be. And it becomes even more reasonable if the cost can be shared between 2 or more organizations. Just as critical as the staff and administration of a literacy program are its volunteers. They are often what make one-to-one tutoring programs even possible, and they need extra support to make a successful transition into an online or remote tutoring world. Many programs shared their struggles with keeping volunteers engaged through COVID-19. Particularly those who were less familiar and comfortable with technology. Now, what helped was offering volunteer training on how to use digital platforms and how to communicate effectively online. Training sessions can be offered to both staff and volunteers at the same time, helping ensure that everyone understands the systems and processes that are being used. Programs that then had staff members launch online tutoring sessions for their volunteers and stay online for a few minutes to provide support to both the learner and the tutor saw particularly good results. Programs that couldn't maintain their original volunteers sought out new opportunities by appealing to people who already had strong digital literacy skills, who may be looking for things to do to keep busy during the lockdown. Some even created a volunteer coordinator position to support recruitment and training for new volunteers, either by reallocating staff or offering a part-time contract position. I think this may be a great opportunity to support a student placement as well. Now, you may have seen this coming, but if not, surprise. For more information about supporting your volunteers, please download a copy of our Engaging Volunteers tip sheet. As with all of the others, a link to this tip sheet will be popping up in the chat shortly. When the first of our lockdowns eased, some agencies returned to face-to-face service at a reduced capacity. Many did not, due to the cost or availability of equipment for safe reopening, because of restrictions in the building where their agency is located, or internal policies and procedures. Those that were able to reopen noted a return of many of their low-level learners who were unable to participate in remote or online learning. They also shared their tips and suggestions for when other programs are ready to take that step. The need for physical distancing often meant an entire reorganization of the learning space, starting with measuring the space available and figuring out where furniture, desks, computers, and bookshelves could go to allow for learner seating with the required amount of space. Most programs covered or removed high-touch surfaces like bookshelves and waiting room chairs altogether, propped open doors when possible so they didn't need to be touched, and installed plexiglass shields between desks. Plexiglass barriers that are on stands that can be moved as regulations change were particularly appreciated in programs that used them. And floor stickers indicating walking directions were used as well. Cleaning and sanitizing were important, of course, and common purchases included hand sanitizer and dispensers, masks and other PPE for both staff and learners, and sanitizing spray and wipes. All of this comes at a cost, which, as we mentioned earlier, was prohibitive for many programs. Programs encouraged others to look for funding sources that could be used to help pay for these items, and found it helpful to participate in a bulk buy of some items with other partnering agencies. The Ontario Nonprofit Network actually set up a bulk buying process near the start of the pandemic to help. Before opening the doors to learners, programs put plans in place that outlined who and how many people could be on site at one time. For most, this went beyond just a reopening procedure, but involved creating and maintaining a schedule of when every staff person and learner was booked to be on site that was fully accessible and editable remotely. That schedule had to include time to clean and sanitize all surfaces between learner appointments as well, not to mention washrooms and other areas that learners may access. The need for this type of scheduling and physical distancing meant that programs were simply unable to serve the number of learners they had in the past. And some learners were still very worried about the health implications of returning to in-person service. Mirroring what secondary schools in the province have done and creating cohorts of learners who could book in-person support only on specific days helped reduce the number of people a learner may come in contact with and the potential risk for some programs. There were lots of new protocols put in place for entry to the learning space as well. Programs suggested creating a clearly written online or paper-based self-screening tool that can be shared with learners and staff, and requiring that they submit it before coming on site. Many followed up with a verbal screening as well, but kept copies of the paper or computer-based self-screening to demonstrate due diligence. Programs often blocked their entryway, which allowed staff to do the COVID screening, gather contact tracing information, review safety protocols and rules, and even take temperatures before allowing learners fully into the site. Maintaining health and safety was easier for programs that also created learner supply packages, so no one borrowed or shared items like pencils or erasers. Many required learners to bring in their own headsets if needed, and set aside a designated chair and storage bin for each learner. Some also quarantined learner work for 48 hours before reviewing it. We have learned a lot during this time of global crisis, and the programs we spoke to stressed the need for all of us to not only share what we've learned, but use it to plan for the future of adult literacy programming in Ontario. This may, and I hate to say it, not be the last health crisis we see in our lifetimes. So, being proactively prepared for future lockdowns or office closures is critical. And some of the practices we've developed to deal with COVID-19 are actually very beneficial. They've removed barriers to attendance and expanded the ways in which we can reach the learners we serve. When we plan for the future, keeping those practices in place is a win for all involved. And now is the time to start thinking about those things, not when there's another emergency to contend with. To prepare for future lockdowns or closures, programs suggested creating a grab-and-go kit of essential paperwork, USB sticks, physical supplies, and digital resources that can be quickly transitioned from home to office and office to home. It's a bit like the work version of the emergency kit that many of us have in case of a power outage, with some bottled water and extra batteries. Having digital resources stored online in a location that can be accessed from both work and home will make putting the grab-and-go kit together a whole lot easier. G Suite for nonprofits is an excellent resource for those considering the move to cloud-based remote access storage and communications. To make the transition to remote work and service delivery in the future, programs also suggested having a tested and reliable virtual meeting platform, much like Zoom. It's also important that programs have up-to-date policies and contingency plans in place ahead of time that address switching from in-person to online or remote learning, succession planning in case of illness within key staff roles, and as we mentioned earlier, sick days or leaves. To help with that, in the next month, Literacy Link South Central will be releasing a pandemic planning manual. It will be available using the link on your screen and will include lots of information about emergency and closure preparedness, along with fill-in-the-blank policy templates that you can use. Post-pandemic, curriculum development will have to be done considering not only in-person delivery, but remote, online, and blended formats. something that will take additional time and work to accomplish. Literacy practitioners would benefit from professional development around learning online, developing curriculum for online, and how they differ now. So both curriculum development and delivery can be done effectively long-term. And when we consider working with learners in multiple formats across multiple platforms, we must also consider the impact of stress on people's ability to learn. As we've seen pretty clearly during this pandemic, there's an impact on concentration, motivation, and focus. Planning for the future may need to include embedding motivational and engagement techniques in the curriculum we design, and formatting it into shorter, more bite-sized learning opportunities. Learning online does not come naturally to everyone. So if it becomes one of our standard ways of delivering service, we need to help learners prepare for that too. They would benefit from the creation of an introduction to online learning. What one program called a boot camp on how to be an online learner. It could include an overview of the kinds of skills needed to learn online, common words and phrases they may encounter, and how to find reliable information, both online or in the digital tool they would be using. Creating walkthrough videos demonstrating how to use meeting software and platforms, how to download documents, complete online forms, or submit assignments in advance would make this bootcamp valuable for many future online learners, and could be developed in partnership with other programs that are all using the same type of platform. Some of what will help Ontario's literacy programs maintain service delivery during a future crisis is something you've already mentioned, which is support and direction from the Ministry of Labour, Training and Skills Development. Programs told us they want to work with the funder to establish a playbook or set of approved directions for shifting from in-person to remote delivery in a crisis. Ideally, this plan would include a commitment to funding necessary PPE and supplies, technology, and curriculum, official direction on the remote administration of milestones and gathering of confidential client information and signature, and recognition of the impact that a global health crisis has on learner attendance, which includes the need for adjusted targets as the result of lockdowns. Programs offered many more suggestions for strengthening their relationship with the ministry, and all of them can be found in the report that today's webinar is based on. Even with this move to remote and online learning, the need for in-person service delivery has not gone away, and it will remain should this type of crisis happen again. With that in mind, finding new ways to support learners, especially those with lower literacy skills or who have limited or no access to technology and internet service, would be useful now. Consider what you wish you had in place to support those learners today, and we can work together to begin the process of figuring out how to make it happen so that fewer people are left behind in the event of a future crisis. Frankly, this is something that the adult literacy field cannot tackle alone, as one of the critical things this pandemic has brought to light is how poverty and the digital divide combine to prevent access to valid and reliable information, services, and critical resources. It will take a coordinated effort from government, social services, nonprofits, and communities to address the needs of the disadvantaged and even the playing field before the next crisis happens. As we said earlier, there have been some practices developed during this crisis that may be beneficial to keep in place, even when we return to whatever our new normal will be. While some programs may not have considered working or delivering remotely, they can now incorporate it into their menu of services, opening up opportunities for learner attendance that they may not have been able to achieve before. The number of different ways that programs have been communicating with learners can also continue, keeping lines of communication open that weren't there before. There can be a cost and time savings to remote work as well, if the work from home environment is set up in a way that allows it. Much like our learners, some staff may not find it easy or productive to work from home, but it's possible that others who are currently working from home would prefer to continue doing so, at least on a part-time basis if the opportunity arose. Throughout our conversation with literacy programs, one common message we heard was the need to learn from what's happened this year and proactively plan for a future based on what we know now. We hope that the information they shared resonated with those of you who's joined us today, and that you found several suggestions you'll be able to use for your own programs, current processes, or future planning. As a reminder, today's webinar provided a look into the information we gathered by speaking with literacy programs from across the province through a combination of 39 surveys and 23 individual interviews. Again, we thank these programs for sharing so much knowledge and so many experiences with us. And remind you that more information is available in the full research report, which is called Best Practices in Adult Literacy Program Delivery During the COVID-19 Pandemic, which is available on the Quill website, along with the tip sheets that we mentioned several times. And not too long from now, there will also be a recording of today's webinar. So before we officially wrap up, I'd like to thank you so much for joining today. Let you know that I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a moment, and we've alluded to this several times. We welcome you to stay and talk and share some of your resources, ask questions to this amazing community of folks that have joined us on today's call. So I will start by checking in with Deb and see if there is anything specifically in the chat that she would like to raise for us.
Thank you very much, Summer. I was just putting information in about the slides and where the resources could be found. There was a bit of a discussion around online learning, pedagogy. And there was, discussion back and forth about that. Tracy Mullins was able to comment on it. Some programs have tried boot camps for the learners. It wasn't really successful. It feels like learners just want to get started. They want to get in there and get started as quickly as possible. So that was it. I'm just going down to the end. Joyce added some comments, Tracy added links to extend ecampusontario.ca, Ontario Extend, and ISTE have some good courses, but the ISTE courses are costly, but worth checking out. A couple, thank you notes from different attendees that have participated today.
Now, this is something that we hadn't spoken of before, so forgive me that I'm throwing this out here live and on air. But do you think that we can gather together the resources that people have been sharing in the chat and post them somewhere that everyone can access later, like possibly on that same page where the...
Oh, definitely.
Yay. All right, so keep an eye, make sure that you've saved that link to the Quill website resources section so that you can take a look at this wealth of information that everyone is sharing today and in our other sessions as well.
Summer, we will probably, once we get the webinar up, the recording up and the transcription, because we are going to have it transcribed. Once we get it up, we'll probably be sharing social media information about where those resources can be found on
Wonderful. Excellent. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is yours. So if you would like to turn on a mic or put up a hand, and we'll give you time to speak or ask questions, you are absolutely welcome to do so. And of course, now that I don't have my screen up, I can actually see the chat, so I get an opportunity to interact with you that way as well.
Well, did you see that wonderful note that we just got? Thank you, ASL interpreters and Summer. So thank you very much.
You're very, very welcome. Wonderful. So Tish has just said, I can't thank you enough for this presentation. It's given me so many ideas. Me too, Tish. All right, I think we'll leave this line open and live for probably another 3 or 4 minutes, just in case nobody has anything to say. You can look at us smiling at you for a while. And if you do have something to say, I'll start a little countdown timer.
I'd just like to say something.
Yeah, of course.
This must have been a lot of work to put together. And I thank you, Summer and LLSC, and everyone who's participated in this, because it's good to have a central area and a central document that we can use as a guide.
Wonderful. Well, big thanks to Jennifer, who was our researcher. She was the one who did all of the outreach to the individual agencies who provided this information for us. So to say it was a team effort is an understatement. This was definitely a team effort to put together.
Yeah.
So lots of thanks and things coming up in the chat. We appreciate that very much. Where can I find the tips list? Deb, you have access to the link to the Quill resources section pretty much at hand, right? Could you pop that in the chat again?
Oh, okay. I think
Thanks.
Yeah.
We'll get that to pop up in chat for you again in just a second, okay? We've got some contact information coming up in the chat as well for people who would like to collaborate. So please, if you're interested in collaborating with each other, do check that chat. And I will say, after the session, should you really wish that you had gotten someone's contact information and didn't, then feel free to reach out to Deb or myself, and we'll see if we can connect you by email, okay?
We can definitely do that, Summer.
Okay, well, things are quieting down. So I think we will say that we have had a wonderful hour and a half with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll probably leave everything open for about 1 more minute as we're seeing some great contact information pop into the chat.
I am wondering, it's Joyce, I am wondering if we go ahead with Deborah's suggestion that we use the CLO and LAWBAC based, what would you call it, Deborah?
It's called Literacy Resources and Discussion Forum. And if all of you have Robin Cook Ritchie's information, she is the person who is monitoring what's going on there. So I'm sure if you spoke to Robin, who most of you probably know, or Joanne Cottery, that they would be able to get that work, decided, because I think it's really important. We've seen a lot of duplication in what people are doing, and it'd be so nice if we had one place for everything.
Well, and it's not worth creating something new if that's the case. I mean, I've been going on to there, but there's not ever much discussion. And I think if all of us kind of joined into that discussion, the people saying that they're wishing they would like to share, then it would be really worthwhile. So I would like to see stuff there.
Oh, I think it's great. Catherine put on a comment that she doesn't know Robin Cook Ritchie, but Catherine, if you Google Lobach Literacy Ontario, she's the executive director with Lobach Literacy Ontario.
And I'm just going to pop that in the Zoom right now so that you can click it if that helps. Oh, nope. That was definitely not what I meant to put in there. Darn it. Okay, if you could just ignore that Zoom meeting link from this morning, feel free. Shoot. You know when you accidentally hit paste instead of copy? Hey, look at that. There's your link to Lobach instead.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. And Robin's email address just popped up in the chat as well.
Yes. Yeah. She has a form for filling in just so that they know what's going on, but I'm sure that she will take the opportunity to expand the horizons of that site.
Wonderful. All right. Again, thank you so much to everyone who attended today. If you need to stay on for a private chat, of course you are welcome to do so. But otherwise, I believe that we are done.